Hello and welcome to my Ciao Bella Land of the Rising Sun mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. If you would like to follow along with the tutorial series, check out the links in the description box below where you can purchase all the supplies that you will need to make this mini album. Let's get into the tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to work on building the cover of the album. So to start, I have 2 pieces of chipboard that measure 7.5 by 5.5 for my front cover and my back cover. Then I have 2 more pieces. These measure just slightly less than 7.5. So it's not 7 3/8, so it's just a little tiny sliver less by 5.5. And these are going to be for my inside right and left covers. Then I have 4 pieces of black cardstock that I have cut to 8.5 by 6.5, and across the bottom of all 4 pieces at the bottom, a 1/2 inch up from the bottom edge, I've drawn a horizontal line just to help me with placing my pieces. Now, if you followed my tutorials previously, you've seen me do this before, but if not, this will help you to get your pieces straight on your paper. So you're going to take your first piece. I just have the back cover here, but we're going to do all 4 of these pieces the same way, so it doesn't matter which one you start with. You're going to apply your adhesive to the entire back cover. If you are using double-sided tape, you want to make sure that you are very generous with it and that everything is covered here so that this paper doesn't lift off. Once you have your adhesive on, you're going to use your guide line here to place this paper or this chipboard piece right in the center of your paper. And then using my bone folder, I'm going to adhere this down. This just gives me that uniform 1/2 inch around the entire piece. Now, once I have my chipboard adhered down, I'm going to come in here and miter these corners. So I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch past that corner, so that whenever I wrap this, it will completely wrap around that chipboard and hide that corner here. Now I'm going to go ahead and just get this started by flipping these ends just to crease it. Now I like to start on my shorter ends. I'm going to run my bone folder up against the edge to make sure that it's nice and tight, and then right along the edge here before I apply my adhesive, and then I'm going to do that same thing to adhere this down. So I'll apply my adhesive on this 1/2 inch tab section, and then I'm going to press this up again using my bone folder first on the edge to make sure that it's nice and tight up against that edge, and then I'm going to burnish this down on the top. Then I'm going to come over here to my second shorter side and repeat that process. Now, once I have my second side adhered down, I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to run it along these other 2 edges. That's going to help me to crease that little extra paper around that corner and hide those corners so that those corners are fully wrapped. Then I'm going to take the edge and fold this over using my bone folder to make sure everything is nice and crisply folded. Then I'm going to add my adhesive here. And then I'm going to fold this back over and use my bone folder to burnish this down. I'm going to focus on these corners and make sure these corners lay nice and straight as well. Then then I'm going to take my second side here, use my bone folder to crease everything first. Then I'll apply my adhesive to my 1/2" tab section and fold this end over. Now my corners are a little sharp, so I'm just going to take them and I'm just going to run them along the desk to flatten them out a little bit, and that did smooth those out. So now I have my first cover wrapped. I'm going to repeat this process with the other 3, and then we'll come back and work on the spines and adding these together. So first you will need to cut 1 piece of chipboard to 2 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then you'll need 2 pieces that measure 1 inch by 5 1/2. Then I have 1 piece of cardstock that measures 3 1/2 by 6 1/2. I've taken my ruler again and I've measured 1/2 inch up from the bottom edge, and I have my line here. Then I have my 2 pieces that measure 2 1/4 by 6 1/2. And again, I've made my lines on the bottom 1/2 inch up from the edge. Just like with the covers, I'm going to start with my spine piece, adding my adhesive to the back of the spine section. And I'm just starting with the larger of the 3 pieces. Then I'm going to place this right here in the center of my cardstock using my horizontal guideline to place this. And then I'm going to repeat that same process with my smaller pieces. Now for these ones, I'm going to place this in the center again and just adhere this down, and I'll do the same thing with my 3rd piece. Once I have all of my pieces on, I'm going to start with my larger piece, and I'm just going to flip over on those short ends. I'm going to take my bone folder. I'm going to crease up the spine piece, and then I'm going to flatten this down, wrapping that paper up against that edge. And I'm creasing these top pieces so that when they're folded, they're angled just slightly down. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Then I'm going to open these up. I'll apply my adhesive to this 1/2 inch tab section here. And then I'm going to repeat that process, adhering the paper snugly against my chipboard to wrap that section. And I'm going to repeat on this top section. Once I have those wrapped, I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out. I'm going to turn this over, and then I'm going to run my bone folder down the long edges to crease my paper up against the spine section. and create these little tabs or wings so that on this side the paper is flat with my chipboard. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my two smaller spines, wrapping both of these in the same manner, pressing my paper up against each side, creating those wings that just very slightly go down on the top and the bottom edge. Now I'm going to adhere these down, and then I'll do the same thing with my final spine piece, and then I'll come back and we will start putting this album together. Next, I'll be starting with my back cover piece and my larger spine piece. I'm going to turn my spine piece over to the outer side and apply adhesive to one of my little tabs or the wings on the side of the piece, making sure that I don't get it too close to that actual spine so that you don't see it on this next step. Now I'm going to place this on the left. I'm using my ruler to help me to place these so that they're straight. I'm going to set my back cover piece right up against that spine piece. Then I'm going to make sure that this is straight, and then I'm going to burnish this down. There's no gap between my pieces, so this is the lay flat cover method, and it does not need to have any space like when you do the wrap method. I'm going to apply my adhesive here to this second 1/2 inch tab on the larger spine section. And then I'm going to place my front cover piece on here. And this is basically how you make a traditional album. So if you followed any of my tutorials, you've done this before. I'm going to again use my ruler to make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. This is right up against that spine. And then I'm going to burnish this down. I'm going to take one of my small spine sections here. I'm going to apply adhesive to one of those pieces here. Using my ruler, I'm going to place this right on the edge, make everything straight, and then burnish this down. Now I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to the second tab on this smaller spine section here. And the next piece is my left inside cover. So I'm going to take that, again using my ruler to line up all these pieces so the edges are straight. And then I'm going to burnish this down. I have my larger spine section, and I have my smaller spine piece next. I'm going to apply my adhesive to one of these tabs on the small spine. And then again, I am just going to use my ruler to line everything up so that it's straight. No space between these two pieces, and adhere this down. And then one final piece, I'm going to apply my adhesive here to my 1/2 inch tab section. And then I'm going to take my cover and make sure that everything's straight, and then burnish this down. I'm going to flip this over. I'm trying not to hit anything so the camera doesn't shake. I'm going to burnish from the inside here. And then what you'll see is, so we've got this, will fold in and into here. This will fold in and into here, and they will meet in the center. And then from the top, the album would look like this. I'm going to open this back up, and we're going to add a couple of pieces here to cover the spines, and we'll be finished constructing our cover. For the first piece, this measures 3.5 by just slightly less than 5.5. Now I'm going to take this piece and apply my adhesive to the entire back side. Now, if you're using wet adhesive like me, you don't want to add too much adhesive so that it warps the paper, but you need to have enough so that this whole thing is covered. I don't know if you can tell very well on camera, I don't have a ton of adhesive. I just spread it out really well with the tip of my glue bottle. And if you're using double-sided tape, make sure that you cover the entire surface of this piece. Now I'm going to take this and lay it right on top of this piece here. It is the same width from each of these two little tabs from the wings, and then it's just a little teeny tiny bit smaller than the cover from top to bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and adhere this down really well and burnish it so that it is definitely flat with no bubbles. Then next I have two pieces that measure 2.25 by just a little bit less than 5.5. I'm going to take the first one and add my adhesive to the back of this piece, just like I did with the previous one, so completely covering the entire back portion. And then for this one, we're going to be placing it on each of these smaller spine sections. So it will be the same width as those tabs, and then again, just a little tiny bit shorter top to bottom. So once you get that into place, go ahead and use your bone folder to burnish this down. Then I'm going to slide my album over, and I'm going to repeat that process with my third and final piece, covering that third and final spine section of my album. Now I'm going to allow these pieces to dry before I start bending this. I don't want anything to bubble and crease, so if you do this before this is actually dry, sometimes it will actually lift off. So I'm going to let this sit, and then I'll come back and we will crease these into the book form using our bone folder. Now once my papers are dry, I'm going to take my bone folder first in these creases here in the center. I'm going to get one started. This cover is really long. I'm going to try not to hit the stand that my camera is on so that it doesn't cause the whole screen to shake. Now as I put my bone folder in here, I'm going to fold up on this crease in the center, and it will actually fold all the way over and be fine. I'm going to crease the next side here, and this other one as well. So I'm just going to crease with my bone folder and then lift. And then on this one, I'm going to crease and lift. Now I'm going to turn this around And same thing on the other side. I'm going to start in my larger spine section, creasing and folding. And then I'll come to my smaller spine section here, creasing with my bone folder, lifting up and folding, and then one final one. And so here we are. I'm going to take one of my tags from my package and I'm going to place the hole on the left side. I'm going to measure from the end 3/4 of an inch. Actually, I am going to use my 6 on my scoreboard. I've measured 3/4 of an inch in, so I know where I'm going to place this. And I'm going to score this here. Then I'm going to fold on that score line. This is going to act as my closure piece. So now, with these papers, or with the covers closed, I know where I need to mark this. Make sure, let's see. So it is a little tiny bit more than 2.5 inches. So you can do 2 and, let me see here. It's between 2.5 and 2 3/8. I am going to put it at 2 3/8 just to be on the safe side. That way when I add my papers on the inside, it's going to add just a little tiny bit of bulk. And I want to make sure that this is going to close properly. So I've got this scored here. It's going to go right here like this. So I have just a little, if you look between my pieces here, I have just a little tiny bit of space. I'm pulling between these. That way if I had some additional papers in there, I'll still have room and this will latch on. So what I'm going to do is adhere this down to there. It doesn't really matter at this point which I choose as my back cover, but I do have mine marked. So I'm going to place mine here and I'm going to center this. So that it's at 2 1/4 from center. Now I'm going to take my tag piece and apply my adhesive on the inside of this. And then I'm going to adhere this to that back cover where I just marked, making sure that I've lined this up so that that score line is right at the edge of the cover. Then I'll adhere this down. And I'm just going to verify and double check that this still wraps around here to the front. I want to make sure that it looks straight. And then I'm going to go ahead and I will add my magnet just to hold this closed. To take my first magnet here, I'm only going to put one. And I'm going to space it, Try to space it as evenly as possible between the eyelet and the score line, because I'm going to paper this. I'm going to add paper to this, and when I cut this, I want to make sure that I can wrap that pretty easily. I'm going to add my second magnet. And now I'm going to very carefully press this up and over to the top. So now that should keep my album closed. Perfect. I need to make 2 hinges for my album, so I'm going to make my hinges like this because I'm only putting 2 pages on each side. I'm not going to do a hinge extension like I normally do with my albums because these pages will actually lay a little bit flatter since there are only 2 of them. So I've got my pieces that measure 1.5 by 5 1/4. On the 1.5 inch side, I'm going to score these pieces at 1/2 inch and 1 inch. Then I'm going to take my scissors and miter the ends on these 1/2 inch sections here, leaving the center section plain. I've already done that to this piece as well. Then I'm just going to fold on my score lines and burnish using my bone folder. And then after scoring in one direction, I'm going to flip this over and score in the opposite direction, just to give these a nice crisp fold so that these will fold and flip in both directions. And so again, you want to do this to both of your pieces to make sure that they both will allow those pages to move easily once they're in the album. Now, before I add these to my album, I'm going to go ahead and score my base pages as well. I have 4 of these pieces. They measure 7 1/4 by 11 inches. Now on the 11 inch side, I'm going to score this at 5 1/4 and 10 1/2. Then on my 1/2 inch tab section down here, I'm going to go ahead and miter these ends. I'm going to fold back on this tab, burnish with my bone folder, and then I'm going to fold on that center score line and burnish this one. Then I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to that 1/2 inch tab section. And once I have my adhesive on, I'm going to go ahead and close this and use my bone folder to burnish this. And I'm trying to keep this as nice and flat as possible so that that pocket doesn't pucker. So now I have my first page. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process with the other 3 pages for my base pages. I'm going to go ahead and adhere my hinges into my spine pieces now. So I'm using my centering ruler here just to mark the center 1/2 inch on my first spine section. Then I'll take my first hinge piece, and on that flat section, I'm going to apply my adhesive here on the entire section. So if you're using double-sided tape, you definitely want to make sure that you have this entire thing covered because you don't want this to lift off of the spine once the pages are attached. Then once I have this with adhesive, I'm going to set this down between those marks and make sure that it is centered from top to bottom. Then I'll go ahead and burnish this down. I'm going to go ahead and open up the other side. Again, starting with marking that center 1/2 inch section on both top and bottom. Then I'll apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch flat section on the second hinge piece. And I'm going to adhere this one down in the center, using those marks as my guide and lining it up centered from top to bottom and burnish this down. Once my hinges are in my album, I'm going to go ahead and close everything up, and we are finished with this part of the tutorial. So we have our album and our base pages. In the next tutorial, we're going to start building up our pages, and then we will begin decorating using the Ciao papers. So I will see you in the next tutorial.